Hello, welcome to our show. I'm Irma Baker, and I'm so pleased to be here today and let you know a little bit about the mystery writing community here in Northeast Ohio. We have really a great group of very active mystery writers, and one of them is with us here today. We'll meet her right after these messages.
RSVP of Summit County has been making a difference in our community since 1972. RSVP volunteers are increasing the quality of life by participating in programs and organizations that provide important services to the community. RSVP matches personal interests and skills with opportunities to serve. If you're interested in adding more meaning to your life and improving the lives of others, please call 330-253-4597 extension 166.
Welcome back. Today is really a very special day because as we're here talking today, it is the day of the release of a brand new series by Casey Daniels. And Casey is here with us today. Casey, I'm so glad you're here.
It's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, you have one of the most prolific careers of our local mystery writers, and really of mystery writers anywhere. You have so many books out, and today is a little bit of a departure for you. You have a brand new series, but so different from the other traditional mysteries that you have done, which have been primarily contemporary. Why in the world did you switch to writing a historical mystery?
Well, the book is called Smoke and Mirrors, and it is out today. And it was totally sort of accidental, because I was doing research for a contemporary mystery that was out maybe 3 years ago. And one of the things I was researching was what's called cabinets of curiosity, which is something pre-Victorian and Victorian. If you were wealthy enough, you would collect things, and you would have a cabinet of curiosity. So when your friends came over, you'd show off your collection of rocks or Greek pottery or butterflies, whatever it was you collected. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And as happens when you start researching, you fall down the rabbit hole and you start researching more and more and more. And what it got me into was early museums, because that's basically what these cabinets of curiosity were. It was the earliest forms of museums. But then I started reading about formal museums, and I never knew, maybe other people do, I never knew that P.T. Barnum, the man who is so famous for circuses, 40 years before he had a circus, he had a museum. And it was called Barnum's American Museum. It was in New York City. And it was fascinating. There was a whale, a live whale in the museum in an aquarium. There were mummies, there were statues, there was a quote-unquote freak show.
Let me ask you something here. You said Victorian. What times are we talking about?
He opened his museum in 1841. And again, New York City, cost 25 cents to get in. And in 1841, he was making nearly $4,000 a day with the people who came into that museum. So the more I read about this museum, yes, do the math, it was a lot of money. The more I read about this museum, I just thought it was fascinating. And I decided it would be the perfect place for a mystery because it's so screwy to begin with. So I created a sister for him. He actually had, in reality, he had 4 sisters. I have given him a 5th sister. Her name is Evie. Evie works at the museum for him. She's his assistant. And it's, like I said, it's such an interesting place. I just knew it would be a great place to have a mystery. I had no intention, I wasn't looking to write a historical mystery. I just thought this was too good to pass up.
How did you present it then to an agent or an editor, or what's the process? How did it come into being?
I wrote probably the first chapter, the way I remember it, and sent it to my agent. And she loved it, and we went from there. Then she started marketing it.
Well, what happens in the book? And don't give away, I don't want any
Oh, I'm not
spoilers or
going to.
anything, but what happens in the book? What does she do in the museum, this fictional sister of P.T. Barnum?
She's basically his assistant. She handles all the ledgers. She makes sure the displays are nice and neat and clean. But as the book opens, she is at the most famous of his exhibits, which of course was the Fiji Mermaid. And if you don't know the Fiji Mermaid, P.T. Barnum started advertising that he had a mermaid on exhibit. And all around the country, letters appeared in the paper from famous scientists saying, oh my gosh, this is the most incredible thing we have ever seen. People must go see this mermaid. Well, all those letters were written by Barnum. He signed different names to them, and he sent them out all over the country, and he was the great promoter. He just created this frenzy. The ads that appeared in the papers to talk about the Fiji Mermaid were these woodcuts of these gorgeous bare-breasted mermaids sitting on rocks, combing their lovely hair. Again, people were interested now what the Fiji Mermaid actually was. She was maybe about 3 feet long and dried up, desiccated, brown, shriveled, mummy-looking thing. And as our heroine Evie says right in the first chapter, she was a total humbug. The head of a monkey, the body of an orangutan, and the tail of a fish sewn together very, very skillfully. And probably made in Japan at one time, because the taxidermists in Japan, this was the proof of what a good taxidermist you were if you could make one of these mermaids. So Barnum bought this thing and just made the most of it, and she was his most famous exhibit. So in the book, we start with the Fiji Mermaid, and Evie is there making sure everything's right as people start coming in, because about 15,000 people a day came to the museum. And she is met by an old friend of hers. The Barnum family was from Bethel, Connecticut, which is about 70 miles from New York City. And her friend Andrew shows up from Bethel and says he needs her help. Well, what we're finding out right from the get-go is she doesn't want to talk to him. There's something in her past she can't let anyone know. So she puts him off, and she puts him off, and she says, I gotta go, I can't talk to you, da-da-da-da-da. And at the end of that chapter, at the end of that day, she has gone to her office, she hid out, worked all day, she comes back out, and she finds Andrew's body under the case with the Fiji Mermaid in it.
Oh my gosh, sounds like she's got some big trouble on her hands now.
Yes, she does. So she feels guilty because she wouldn't help him, and that kind of gets her pulled into investigating. There was no police force in New York at the time. There was a constable, but no police force, so no one actively investigating it. So she does, and meets some interesting characters, excuse me.
When you are talking about it, these characters come to life.
Yes.
How do you create these characters?
Oh, that's how many weeks do you have? That's like a 6-week session in a writing class. I think a big part of it is just deciding, what would this person do? Okay, here's this sister of P.T. Barnum. She's got secrets. She's been avoiding this man. Then she finds him dead. What's she gonna do? Well, what kind of person is she? She's a pretty bold person, because while she's waiting for her brother and the constables, she goes through his pockets. And that enables her to find some clues. So I think as you're writing, what you're always doing with every character is saying, okay, what would he do now? How would she react to this? And sometimes the first thing you think of, you reject, because no, that's not in keeping with her character. So you're always playing that what-if game. Okay, what if she found a body? What does she do? What does she do next? How does she react? What does she say to people? It's very much like playing a sort of a movie in your head, and you're seeing these people act out their parts.
When you're talking about a character, it's obvious that this is a skill that you have to create characters, to bring them to life, to create situations where they are faced with an obstacle or a challenge of some kind. Now you have, at last count, and I'm afraid I have lost count of how many books you have published, but I think it's somewhere close to 60,
Yes.
maybe over 60.
I've lost count too, but let's go with 60.
Okay, we'll go with 60.
That's good.
Under a variety of names.
Yes.
We have some of them on the table here under various names. I know that you've written as Miranda Bliss, you've written as Kylie Logan.
And still write as Kylie.
You still write as Kylie Logan. In fact, French Fried, the newest book in that series, just came out not earlier this year.
Yes.
And of course, writing as Casey Daniels, which is where you're best known. But over the time period of writing all those books, how do you feel your skills have developed?
Well, I hope they have, because the only way to learn how to write is to write. So I hope I'm a better writer than I was 25 years ago when I published my first book. That's all I can say. How have they developed? I think because each book you write, each sentence you write, you're always asking yourself, okay, how can this be better? And hopefully that builds over the years and you become more and more skilled.
Do you think that you would ever have attempted to write or successfully written the kind of book you're writing now, say 20 years ago?
I started my career writing historical romance. So I do have that love of history. But I don't know. What I found, I haven't written anything historical in a long, long time, and have never written a historical mystery. What this whole experience has taught me is I forgot how much work it was, because you're researching everything. Evie's at home eating breakfast. What would she be eating? Who would be serving it? What kind of dishes are on the table? What is she wearing? There's always something. She leaves the house. How does she get to the museum? What kind of carriage is she in? What streets are they driving down? Because we are in New York City in 1842 when the book opens. You've got to know New York City in 1842, which I do not. My historical romances were always late Victorian, because, well, number one, because I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan, and I feel very comfortable in that late Victorian era. I understand it. I know the terminology, and 1842 was a stretch, let me tell you. So it was a lot of work.
When you look back at that, certainly, it's an understatement to say that research technology has changed over the time. But when you wrote historical romances, compared with the writing of historical fiction today, what do you see are the differences between the technology you had then or the research requirements then as to what's available today or what's required today?
You were always going to the library then. So you'd make a list. Okay, I need to know what kind of shoes women wore in 1875, or I need to know this, and then you'd go to the library and either root through all the shelves or order books. Now, of course, we have the good old internet, so that has made it so much easier. But like you said, what is required? You're also running into, I always have to know more. It's out there. I can't say, I could only find one book, because it's out there. It's on the internet. I have to keep researching. I have to know more. So in a lot of ways, it's great, because you can say, okay, what did they eat for breakfast? Google, 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 find out what they ate for breakfast. But I miss the library too, because we all love books. That's why we're readers and that's why we're writers. So I do miss digging through the stacks for things. But it has made it a lot easier than it used to be.
Do you find it also puts an added responsibility on you from the fact that your readers are out there also having access to all of this and going to read your book and maybe say, oh, I don't think that's right?
Oh, they'll let you know, too, if they don't think it's right. Absolutely. Now, this book just came out today, so I'm not getting any of that yet. But I can say with the contemporary mysteries I've written, a lot of what you run into now is people think what they see on TV is right. And it's not. So you get the emails about, well, why didn't she just do a DNA test because she could have had the answers back 2 days later and known who the murderer was? No, that's not how the real world works. So fiction and reality get a little mixed up on TV, and readers don't always remember that.
Of course, on TV they have to get the whole thing solved
in an hour or 40 minutes with commercials.
However long they have for it, but that's not the way things really work.
Right.
Well, that's something to keep in mind then when you're reading a book, that a book may be closer to reality, even though it's fiction. The authors like yourself are making it as accurate to reality as possible.
Depending on the book, yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens next for Evie? Is she Evie Barnum?
Evie Barnum, yes, she is. I'm not sure. That's my answer. I'm not sure right now. We'll see.
Oh, we're going to little teaser there.
I wish I had a better answer for you on that one, but I don't.
Well, when you were doing the research for this first book in the series, Smoke and Mirrors, let's say you found something that you really, really caught your attention. Did everything you find get in the book?
Oh, no, it can't. Because number one, then the book would be that big, and number two, it'd be so boring. And I think that's often the hardest part of research, knowing what to use and what not to use. A writer has to research and research and research so that you know the answers, but you can't put everything in there. And then you're reading history, you're not reading fiction. So you have to pick and choose what fits in with what I'm doing and what doesn't. What I have found lately, and I didn't used to do this, I used to back in the day research and research and research and research. And then you do know so much that you get overwhelmed with it. What I found myself doing in this book is writing. Oh, I have her in this situation, now I need to know this. So I could just research those facts and not get overwhelmed. Although the whole American Museum is just so fascinating, it'd be easy to get overwhelmed with that place. I think, what was I just reading about it? They had 10,000 items on display, or was it 100,000? The whole place. I mean, they had a wax replica of all the generals in the Mexican army. Now, who would want this? I don't know, but they had it. And they all had on the right uniforms and just the most bizarre things. And again, you got to know what to pick and choose there, because there's 10,000 different things you could talk about.
It sounds like P.T. Barnum kind of got his feet wet with this American Museum.
Absolutely.
And took pieces of it then and incorporated them later into his circus ventures.
Yes. Before he had the greatest show on earth, he was already the greatest showman on earth. And there's a movie coming out next month, starring Hugh Jackman, no less, as Barnum. And thank you, Hugh, for doubling up on the publicity here. And I think the museum will be part of that. And I think it's called The Greatest Showman, actually.
Well, that sounds like that's going to be a fun movie. And
Yes.
it'd be great to read your book ahead of time
Yes,
and get
absolutely.
an insight
Yes.
into what the museum was like. And then sit there later and watch the movie and think, now, this is where they deviated a little bit.
Well, yes, it'll be interesting to see how they handle the history of it, too. So
you started writing this book because you were doing research for something else.
yes.
What was it that you were researching?
I was researching one of the League of Literary Ladies mysteries, which I write as Kylie Logan. Those are set up at South Bass Island at Put-in-Bay, and I think it was the third book in that. There are 5 so far in that series. And I was researching something in the third book, and like I said, just tripped over this whole Cabinet of Curiosity, early museum kind of things. And from there, I just knew I couldn't pass it up, because it is one bizarre place. I mean, I think the interesting part is Barnum knew a lot of it was nonsense, but he thought that was really funny. And he thought his patrons would think it was really funny. So you could come to the museum and you could see real things. You could see a mummy. You could see the Queen Dowager's coach. And then you could turn a corner and have a good laugh. And then you could go back to serious things. So he wasn't trying to necessarily fool anybody. He just thought it was hilarious, and he thought everybody else would think it was hilarious too. In the meantime, he eventually built a theater attached to the museum. It was the first place Uncle Tom's Cabin was ever dramatized. He was a huge abolitionist and used the theater for lecturers and speakers. Big believer in women's rights, so he promoted that at the museum. Interesting man, very interesting.
Oh, bringing up the idea that he was a great proponent of women's rights, is that why he had his younger sister working in the museum, at least is that the way you phrase it in the books?
It's one of the reasons, yes. He believes there should be no difference between women's work and men's work. So for lots of complicated and secret reasons, when she needs a job, he's more than willing to give it to her. And he is also more than willing to say, of course she's my assistant. She's the smartest person here. Are you kidding me?
When she comes to work, she's brought a lot of baggage with her.
Yes.
How old is she?
Oh boy, can I remember? I'm not exactly sure. I think 24.
So mid-20s.
Yes, yes, she's pretty young.
Mid-20s.
Barnum was only 32 when he opened the museum. So he was quite a young man, married, had a couple kids, and was making his way. He had done a lot of things in his life, but it wasn't until he had the museum that things kind of clicked.
He seems to have been a man of extreme energy. Is
Yes.
that the history of him?
Yes, oh, very much. Very outgoing, very affable, very personal, and like I said, just took such great joy in things. Let's make people laugh kind of thing. Let's entertain them. Let's show them something that's so different from their everyday lives. There were, at the time his museum was open, I think the population of the United States was 32 million. By the time the museum closed, it eventually burned down in 1865, 35 million people had come through that museum. So his whole thing was, let's show them a different world.
Okay, now here I do have to do the math. And this one sounds pretty simple. If there were 32 million people, then the equivalent of more than the population of the entire country, not that it was everyone there, people must have come back and back and back.
Yes, or people who were visiting the country came in. Yeah, it was an amazing place, and that's what hooked me. It was so different, and especially for that time. Think about it, 1842. The first big waves of immigrants are just coming to the country, Irish and German. People are working basically farm jobs, but they're starting to come to the cities for work. And life is probably pretty grim for them, but you can spend 25 cents and you can walk into this world. There was a balcony above the front door of the museum, and Barnum hired the worst musicians he could find to play on the balcony, because he figured people would be so glad to get away from them they'd pay their 25 cents and come into the museum. So that's what you're dealing with, this crazy, frantic, frenetic atmosphere. I think it's fascinating.
Well, it's been fascinating talking with you today, and I'm so looking forward to reading the book, and all the best with the books that follow this one.
Thank you.
I hope you'll be back with us again, and I hope all of you will be back with us again too for our TV show. Please have a wonderful day.
Since 1971, RSVP has been matching volunteers' talents to community needs. RSVP is affiliated with the Corporation for National and Community Service, a national organization that supports service and volunteering through grant-funded projects. Volunteers organize neighborhood watch programs, tutor children, renovate homes, plant community gardens, assist victims of natural disasters, and serve their communities in many other ways. RSVP offers maximum flexibility and choice to its volunteers as it matches the personal interests and skills of Americans 55 and older with opportunities to serve their communities. If you're interested in adding more meaning to your life and improving the lives of others, please call 330-253-4597, extension 166.